my beautiful lovelies, it's Emmy. How are you? It's great to see you, and welcome back to another episode of Hard Times, where I explore recipes that come from times of hardship. Today we're going to be going to the Depression era, it's around the 1930s, to make Hoover Stew. Now this stew got its name from President Herbert Hoover, and because he was US president at the time, he was often the one that was given the blame to all of the terrible woes of the people during the Great Depression. Because so many people lost their jobs, they also lost their homes, and shanty towns began appearing. These were called Hoovervilles. Newspaper was called Hoover blankets, and cardboard was called Hoover leather, and this recipe is called Hoover Stew. It is a very simple stew made of things that are relatively inexpensive and can feed a crowd of people. So I'm going to be making it today. Down in the description I'll put links to the references I used to create this video, and the recipe I'm going to be testing today comes from A Coal Cracker in the Kitchen by Lori Fogg. Again, I'll put a link down below. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. One other thing, if you've missed my other recipes from Hard Times, I will put a Hard Times playlist down below as well. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. So right here, I've got a bunch of water coming up to a boil. This is salted, by the way. I always try to boil my pasta in salted water. So now that it's going vigorously, I've got a box of elbow macaroni right into there. And it says to cook it for 8 to 10 minutes. So give that a little stir so that the pasta doesn't stick to the bottom. And that there's water surrounding the pasta. We're going to be rehydrating this dry pasta. So we're going to cook this for 8 minutes or until it's almost fully cooked. We're also going to cook it in a sauce, so that's why we're taking it out a little bit early. While that comes up to a boil and cooks away, I'm going to set that aside for a minute. So the other ingredients for this recipe are a can of tomatoes. This is a big can. This is 28 ounces, and a regular sized can of corn. But the notes in the recipe say that you can add pretty much whatever you've got. If you want to add some onion, if you want to add some fresh pepper, basically any little bits that you've got around you can toss into this stew, including an extra can of beans or any other kind of canned vegetable you've got. But the recipe specifically says these two things. And a package of hot dogs. And this particular ingredient reminds me of one of my first Hard Time recipes I made, and it was by Clara, and she had a channel here on YouTube that focused on the recipes that she remembered from the Great Depression. Clara unfortunately is no longer with us, but her videos live on along with all of her stories and her recipes. So let's go ahead and cut up our hot dogs. Now this also reminds me of Clara because she talked about using hot dogs because they were inexpensive, and she sliced them into very thin coins, which this recipe also says to do. Makes sense. If you cut them thinly, you get a larger pile, seemingly enough, even though it's the same amount of meat, kind of stretches out the protein. So coins, I'm gonna cut these pretty thinly like this. Okay, so that's about 1/4 inch. Cut these up. Now using this knife reminds me of Clara also because she talked about in one of her videos, and in fact, I think all of her videos, she cuts with a paring knife. Just a knife like this, and she cuts over the pan like this, right onto her thumb, which always makes me a little nervous because I feel like she's gonna cut her thumb, but she never did. And she said this is what her mother would do. Just cut right over the pan like this. No need to use a cutting board, you just cut right over the pan. Using a bigger knife and cutting 3 at once seems a little bit quicker. And I've gotten a lot of comments in those videos when I mentioned her cooking like that, saying, oh yeah, my grandmother used to cut that way too. Super sweet. Alrighty, now we're going to drain our pasta. Lost a couple. That's all right. And I'm going to use the same pot. So I'm going to save also the cooking liquid in case we need this to be a little soupier. So the original recipe says to just dump everything in together with the macaroni. But just to give things a little bit more flavor, let's go ahead and brown our hot dog pieces just to get a little caramelization. And because hot dogs are so salty, I'm not going to add any additional salt, but also in the notes of the recipe, It said that you can add black pepper if you like, Italian seasoning, but anything that you have that would make this tasty to you. So I'm definitely gonna add black pepper. So let's go ahead and do that. So to the hot dogs, we're gonna add 1 can of drained corn and 1 big can of stewed tomatoes. Whew, this is gonna make a lot of food. And we're just gonna stir this up, let this cook for a few minutes so that the flavors can kind of meld. The corn, of course, is already cooked, and so is the meat. So at this point, we're just getting everything happy together. Now the hot dogs have plenty of salt in them, so I'm gonna wait to add any salt. And I also salted the pasta water, so that should have some salt in it as well. So we're gonna turn up the heat and bring this to a simmer. It's colorful at least, hey? And it makes a lot. So let that cook a bit. Alrighty, let's check on the tomatoes and hot dogs. So everything is bubbling and simmering away. And now that it's heated up, it's released a lot more juice. So that's gonna be kind of like the sauce for our pasta. Okay, now we're going to add our macaroni. Oh, this is gonna be a tight fit. If you don't want that to happen to your pasta, you can rinse it with some cold water, or you can add a little bit of olive oil to your pasta so it doesn't stick. That was funny, I lost a few. All right, so now we're going to just gently fold everything together. Because it's elbow macaroni pasta, I automatically think cheese. So if you had some cheese, I think that would probably be a great addition to this. Even if it was grated Parmesan, just something a little extra to give this a little bit of richness. But we're just gonna have it like this because that's what the recipe says. But the recipe said also, this is a recipe to use all the little bits up in your pantry, in your refrigerator, whatever you've got. And that's it. That's our Hoover Stew. Ready, let's give this a taste. Alrighty, let's go ahead and give our Hoover Stew a taste. It certainly makes a lot, doesn't it? It's hot, it's steamy, it's colorful. Make sure you stir it to get all the way to the bottom because the pasta at the bottom is going to be softer than the pasta on top because it's absorbing all of the tomato juices. Alrighty, there it is. Alrighty, let's give this a taste. Make sure we get a bite with everything. Itadakimasu. Oops, dropped some of my corn. Alrighty. My first taste of Hoover Stew. Itadakimasu. It kind of tastes like what you would imagine. It definitely doesn't need any salt. There's plenty of salt in the hot dogs. And we salted the pasta too while we were boiling it. So definitely salty enough. The hot dogs give it a little bit of a smokiness. And garlicky flavor, of course meatiness too. Because we use chopped tomatoes, they aren't like a tomato sauce. So they add a tomato flavor without it being so strong like a spaghetti sauce. It's kind of a light tomato flavor. And the corn's in there, but I don't really taste the corn because it's kind of sparsely distributed in here. Okay, let me get some corn. I don't really taste the corn as much as kind of feel it. As I'm biting it, there's kind of a succulent kind of crunch. I'm like, oh yeah, that's corn. And then you get that canned tinny corn flavor, which I happen to kind of like because growing up, we ate canned corn pretty infrequently. And so when I had it, I remember my mom, she would open up the can of corn, drain the water out, and I would steal the little niblets out of the can because they just tasted good. There was something about that canned corn flavor that I really liked as a child. Yeah, I don't know. At any rate, you can definitely taste it in here. And this is a very humble recipe. It would fill your belly with lots of pasta, carbs, and protein. It's easy to make. It feeds a crowd. Is it delicious? It's fine. But as I said, it checks off all the boxes of giving you some vegetables, some starch, some protein, definitely enough salt. It feeds a lot of people, and it's relatively inexpensive. So definitely does the job. There you have it, Hoover Stew. If I were to make this again, I would definitely recommend adding a teaspoon of dry Italian seasoning mix, or dried basil, or dried oregano, some kind of, or thyme, some kind of dry herb would be really great in this, or fresh herbs if you've got it. Something to add a little extra facet of flavor to this. Even something like an onion or a couple cloves of garlic or something like that, just to add some additional complexity. Because really, this is hot dogs and macaroni. That's what it tastes like, with, you know, tomato to kind of round things out a bit. The tomatoes lend some acidity to it, but yes, it could use more for sure. But seasoning goes a long way. Alrighty, my lovelies, there you have it. Hoover Stew, an inexpensive meal to feed a crowd. If you are interested in other Hard Times recipes, I will put a link down below to the playlist. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you learned something. Please share this video with your friends. Follow me on social media. I love hearing from you. I love your suggestions. Like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye! Hoover Stew kind of reminds me of like Hoover vacuums. Like, was that a vacuum cleaner sound? That sounded more like, I don't know, swarming bees or something.